we going to be looking at each other or are we going to be looking there?
I don't know. What do you think? What's weirder?
No, you're not the smart expert in this. I know.
It's weirder to look at the screen. Let's do that.
It's weirder. Okay, so we'll go for the weird one. Okay. Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
So I know what you can do. I'll be looking at you in the screen.
Yeah. And I'll be wait, who am I looking at? Welcome to Movie Talk! Yay! Special episode tonight with Kathrina Peterson, and we're reviewing. What are we reviewing tonight?
Bombay Beach.
What is Bombay Beach?
Well, it is an impressionistic documentary of the residents, or some of the residents that actually live in the community around Salton Sea.
All right.
In the desert.
Uh-huh.
It's Mojave Desert in Southern California.
Okay. How did you enjoy Bombay Beach?
Well, it was... it stretched parts of myself in different directions.
Okay.
Yes,
Which directions does it stretch them? And which parts, exactly? And will they stretch back?
Well, I was very much impressed by the young boy in terms of just his inner world and his imagination. And some of the ways, at least in the film, it was depicted in terms of just the permission allowed by his mother in allowing him to just play in that world. Mm-hmm. So that aspect in terms of like, well, which gender and what kind of expression of the color of hair or and again, this is, I think, the creative license of the directors probably as well that played into it, and that was a little bit of a surrealistic moments, I would say. I don't. Would you agree with those? Like the in and out of the what's happening to these dreamlike scenes. What do you think?
The whole movie was dreamlike, and it seemed like the movie was basically a depiction, sort of a hyper-real version or hyper-real depiction of these people's inner lives. Mm-hmm. And the boy was kind of the most hyper-real of them all.
Hyper-real. How? Why do you think he's the most hyper-real?
Because I think he was the least, in as much as there's a reality out there that's not dream-based, he seems the least embedded in a reality. Mm-hmm. He seemed like the most, not really lost, but the most encapsulated in his own dream mind.
Mm-hmm. I felt like the gap between what is presented in the film in terms of the artistic license and his actual presentation, the gap wasn't very, very big.
Yeah.
As opposed to, let's say, with the older man that had the three girlfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed like, yeah.
How do you mean with the difference in gap?
I mean, you're talking about the hyper representation. So for me, when I think about it that way, there's the hyper representation, but then the in and out of it, the coming in and out. But
I see that the boy presentation of the boy was most consistently.
It was most consistent.
Surreal or dreamlike.
And at the same time real.
Yeah. Because
there wasn't much distinction.
Yeah, you get a sense that more or less what his world looked like anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Did you feel that too, or what was your take on that? Compared to the other characters?
Yeah, compared to the other two. Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't get a sense that their inner lives were so depicted so much as sort of selected or abstracted. In other words, it seemed like the film. Yeah, I agree. The gap with the two other characters between the filmmakers' kind of frame was he selected less of their inner life than the boys. It seemed like he almost could have, the frame around the boy was the frame of the film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like it just seemed like, I mean, as a person watching this for the first time without really knowing much about what the film is, even, you know, I just knew it was about the Salton Sea. I didn't know it was a impressionistic, surrealistic, artistic representation of certain facets. I didn't realize that. So it was a little bit confusing, but it's more than just confusing for me. It had an element of like, okay, there was a certain realness, but I'm not sure if it's rehearsed or not. Yeah. Like, for example, when the mother was speaking to her daughter in the swing set in the desert about when she got pregnant for the first time and when she first met her father. Like, it was obvious that it was real, but there was a certain flatness to the way she was presenting it, and I wasn't sure because it was rehearsed for the film, or that was kind of like her medium, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know, what is that? What was your sense of her in particular, like?
The mother?
Yeah, or just, you know.
The mother seemed depicted pretty, she didn't seem sculpted by the filmmaker very much. Mm-hmm. Just checking our framing.
There we are.
Excellent. Werner Herzog, in his quote-unquote documentaries, apparently plays and played a lot of had a lot of license, mm-hmm. and would set up situations because he wanted certain things to be said rather than actually he was documenting anything kind of in vitro. Mm-hmm. And so this film doesn't really allow us to know how much was even scripted, really. Mm-hmm. And how, I mean, obviously a lot of the scenes were constructed, like the fireman scene with the boy at the end, or the two young lovers with all the masks. But which is a kind of another interesting thing is like this community seems so unrooted anyway. So like you go out to the desert and you see all this junk blown away around, all these bags and garbage and things just blown around, and without any real order or sense of permanence, mm-hmm. or rootedness. And so the film seems itself to not give you a root to hold on to. Mm. It's like these floating, I mean, they're coherent and there's a narrative, but it seems like this floating collection of dream images.
Mm. Well, it's interesting, you know, because I could see that, yet at the same time, it was also like a place of hope and dreaming a future, like that young boy playing football and leaving LA in order to not be in the gang and be killed.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, there was this like lack of rootedness, but at the same time, there was a sense of like this place was the way out as well. So there was just that paradox and the I don't know, it's almost like the different facets of a mirror. You know, if you have like a ball with facets, a mirror ball, and all these different slices of life. That for me was just like, oh. You know, I thought the Salton Sea was a place that maybe, you know, this, what do you call this, these seniors that from the north who come down to the south.
Yeah, like a resort town or something.
Yeah, and that they, you know, that's what I thought originally. So I had no idea until we watched the movie of just the varied lives and also the poverty. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of what struck, one of the things that struck the most was just the poverty and the choices that come out of that based on what's available within that community as well, not just in terms of resources of the community, but inner resources of the parents. Like, you know, what do they pass on to their kids as what's possible or not. So that was for me like, oh, you know, it was sobering in one way. It's surrealistic, but it's also very sobering to see that of like, oh, this isn't San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't Marin County.
Yeah, and it seemed like the filmmaker was interested in presenting, it was kind of flagrantly uninterested in presenting a documentary, but it seemed very interested in presenting the tone of life when it has to flow through and around all this wreckage. Literal wreckage and internal wreckage. Yeah. And I appreciate it because it didn't make grand claims to the nature of life or the nature of this place or people. It seemed quite, I mean, strangely honest in its manipulations of the, yeah.
Yeah. It was, I definitely agree with that. It was just, it was for me like taking a cold shower. That had the effect of it, you know.
Do you feel cleaner afterwards?
I think I felt cleaner. I think it felt more, for me, was a reminder of a reality check that there's not one way of being raised and not one way of thinking. And I mean, even just in terms of the licensure to the creativity, and I don't know if that was because the filmmaker had done that, had done it as part of the scripting, or is there an actuality that's present over there? Was it symbolic, or was it more than symbolic, or both? So I take the example of again, the old man with that, the three girlfriends, and he would dance on the stage, this makeshift stage. So I'm left to go, because I didn't know that things were staged until the end, pretty much. So I'm looking at that scene when he was dancing with these three women, and I was thinking, wow, how resourceful and creative is this community to create a little playhouse for them with whatever stuff they had.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just my optimistic nature, and I tend to see that. Yet now that, because there was a staging, I wonder now, was that stage completely?
Yeah.
Partially? Was the filmmaker making a statement symbolically that was, that he was this lover gigolo of the Salton Sea?
I think the first lines in the film was the old man defining love, right?
Okay. I don't remember now.
I think so. And I mean, it seems like that's the other way of framing the film, is that this is a depiction of, these weedy, dry weeds of people pushing up through the wreckage of this area, and the way in which love finds interstices in life, even in this dry, sort of psychically and literally dry area. So again, I think the film it's a funny intersection of reality, because the people don't seem staged as people.
Nor the stories.
No.
Yeah.
No, but they're definitely lensed. I mean, like, you can imagine sitting with the old man was a wreck in the hospital. That's what awful near end of life looks like for certain people. And, you can imagine other ways to frame that, which would have been, emphasizes the dismalness or the wastage of a life, or the wreckage done to other people. Which I think would have been as valid an impressionistic piece as this one. It's just, I think this one's chose to make a tone poem out of how love finds cracks to push up through.
Interesting. I somehow, I can see that there is that thread of love that kept coming through. I mean, one of the scenes was saying this is a place of misfits. But there was something for me that even saying that is coming from a place of like, this is what's normal and this is what's not normal, and it should be like this and it shouldn't be like that. So to have love come pushing through even in this whatever, for me it was more of like, whatever the external environment was, it didn't really matter so much, but it was just, this is the reality. This is one of the realities, or many realities of existence for many families and communities in the United States and in the world. So it was just like, oh yeah, this is how a family come together in this particular, like in this family, you know, and they were broken apart and come together, and in the different levels of caring, like in this particular case, like how the mother and the father were. It's almost like during the film I kept being reminded, this internal reminder kept coming, let go of any kind of comparisons right now. Because I think it's so easy to be seduced by the comparison. Like I said, you know, when I watched this play last night of the Republican family in Palm Springs, and which seems like, you know, we have the stereotype and the caricature, or even the quote unquote, depending on where we situate ourselves in the socioeconomic structure, no, of how it's supposed to look like.
How family is supposed to look like?
How family, or
whatever.
how love, or work, or ambition, or hope, or despair, or dating, or whatever. And this film for me, it was just like, there was a rawness to it. That was just, yeah, can I just surrender to the rawness of this film, of all the different depictions, without me comparing it to anything that I know, or even hold up or down.
Yeah.
So that was very fascinating, the interface. And for sure, there were certain parts for me, like I just wanted to cringe and just say, oh, geez. You know, because there was a certain, the rawness that was being presented, I could see that I had some judgment value in certain things, like Ritalin, you know, and taking the child being given lithium, and then the neurologist and the way he answered mother, there was a certain revulsion in me, which I also find is because it's based on coming from a particular slice of, maybe I would even say Bay Area liberalism. Yeah, or also because there's just, I think out of the box in many ways. So I could appreciate a lot of the out of the box things that were happening, that these kids were able to be exposed to in terms of the freedom. Yet at the same time, there were certain scenes that I just felt like, I just wanted to kind of like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the film is so open in a way that just like it's narrating, although it seemed more like a painting, it's choosing a certain way to represent a scene. It seems like we have a lot of freedom too in how to interact with the film, and it doesn't really, it's not forcing our hand any more than to assert that the pain and damage of this area, that there's that hope. It's not hopeless, but past. I mean, because I think that's definitely better than the film. So you would have to really really contort yourself to create an interpretation or lens on the film that doesn't include that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think beyond that, you're pretty free in how you're going to frame up the film. So for me, the sort of static catastrophe of that area was unavoidable. I guess I really bought into what the film was saying, which again I think its perspective was that even severe damage does not exclude an area or a people or a family from life. Life doesn't stop.
No, I agree. Like, I feel like there's the film depicted a particular normal that's not any less normal or more normal than all the other normals that we find elsewhere. In terms of the basic tenets of what is it to come together, to live, and to love.
You think?
I think so. I think, yeah, because
there's some pretty harsh set points in those people around which to find connection and love and thriving.
Well, I think say more about what you're saying.
Well, in terms of it being one normal among normal, yeah, I mean it's one social configuration among social configurations. But if you start comparing qualities, there's some different qualities presented between a relatively financial and emotionally stable family and this one.
Well, but that's the thing. What I'm saying is that if I watch the film giving my sets of comparisons and contrasting, then I'm not really surrendering to the reality that's being presented.
But there isn't a reality presented. There's an interpretation.
An interpretation. So for me, in my experience with the film, for me to actually go into the film itself, because I could see like those different beliefs of what is thriving, what's not. Yeah. In terms of my own whatever background. But here I had to consciously, no, let me just put that aside. So I was very deliberate as they arose in me to put them aside so that I can just watch and receive the film without...
What's going on there?
Yeah. So
watch and receive the film.
Just watch and receive the film for what it's giving, rather than me saying, well, of course there was a running voice, wait a minute, why are there dead fishes around? Why... that was inevitable that all those different observations, and because they're not normal in my world.
Yeah.
But for me to watch the film also more in entirety, I had to kind of like keep putting aside what my norm was, even though those would come to my consciousness.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's. I guess another way to think about it is it's predicting. It's putting out a kind of psychescape. Like this is one. Like the film almost takes the elements it has at hand, just like the people there takes the various wrecked buildings and toys and things.
That's just that.
Well, it's just that, but as things to create art from, in a sense, create life from.
Yeah. From the film's perspective, or from the residents' perspective.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the residents were, both the children and the adults, were, taking this. In some ways, taking both the human and the environmental destruction, and making new life out of it, or trying to.
Well, it's interesting, to hear your outlook on that, because I think for me, I grew up in the desert, so a lot of the things I also saw were kind of normal growing up in the desert. They're not they're not normal coming from the Bay Area or maybe from the suburbs, but growing up in the desert, they're actually pretty normal. So
like dead fish all over?
not the dead fish, but the fact that there's really not very many things to do, or that you do play out in the desert. Not necessarily playing explosives like in the film.
Or in destroyed buildings?
And destroyed buildings. But there's actually a lot of abandoned buildings in the desert, and there's a lot of people leave a lot of cars in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And the infrastructure that we see in urban places or even agricultural rural areas is very, very different. So I think even we have to kind of like look at this film with the stark reality, not just of the abandonment and wreckage that is like I would say culturally or sociologically part of this Salton Sea area.
And ecologically.
Ecologically.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like there were all these things as they were walking down the sea, along the sea. I keep seeing the openness of the desert and the sunsets, and the certain because the nature there is such, it afforded a certain freedom
Mm-hmm.
that I feel were like the pluses for these kids that a lot of the kids in the urban areas wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting because I was kind of like seeing both.
Yeah.
Together with that.
Well, it seems like it offers both a freedom, both of, I mean, some ways of creativity and of thought, because it's such a marginal, both place and marginal compared to the sort of mainstream of American culture.
Mm-hmm.
That it offers that kind of freedom. It also has a really profound rootlessness.
Well, I suppose, what do you mean by a profound rootlessness?
I mean, the slab city, they literally had constructed this almost found object of a society
mm-hmm.
in what looked like the remains of the foundations that are left over and the buildings are cleared away.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have rolling homes.
Mm-hmm.
And like the guy says, Slab City is composed of all misfits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's no roots there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, almost literally, you can't put down roots through concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's on rolling houses,
But it's interesting that here they're like what you're saying. There's not the rootedness, yeah. Yet going down, but there's somehow this connection that, like when that old man had a stroke and the other neighbors were kind of caring for him and concerned for him. So even though they didn't really know each other, or
mm-hmm.
I just really thought also that they were connected this way.
You have a much more optimistic soul than I do. Because I'm looking at them thinking, these guys are barely holding apart. He's threatening some guy with a gun, selling bootleg cigarettes for money, drinking, presumably an alcoholic.
Yeah.
There looks like a lot of mental illness in that culture.
Yes.
One guy's going to prison.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely saw all those things. And I also saw for myself of like, yeah, actually a lot of people in the world also live like this.
Yeah.
Like wow, how, for me what it came up when as much as there were certain things that were revolting for me, and it's just the way he was sharing the bigotry, and the racism. I could also see like here's this old man who's obviously not happy at certain points of the film, who was struggling to live, who was explaining and sharing how he tries to make it financially, and he's trying to be as resourceful as he could given what he had.
Mm-hmm. And
so I felt actually sad. I felt like, wow, is this the pattern of it, yeah? Is this pattern of our seniors in our society having to struggle to make ends meet because they're poor, or they're not embedded in a family or community that is actually helping them. So for me, it was not just a statement of his personal life, but it was a statement of not just Salton Sea, but a statement of our American society as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Because the guy seemed like quite a fuck up.
Yeah, but it's still...
I mean, so I don't...
Yeah.
From within the frame of the film, I'm not sure how you could... that seems a little layered on.
Layered on? What do you mean?
Well, rather than something the film was actually presenting.
Well...
It didn't seem like it had anything to do... any social commentary to make.
Well, I think... Well, I don't know. I don't know if that the film was actually intending to make anything, but since it's a film that's open to interpretation, then that is what is evoked in me, and that's simply what I'm sharing with you. Is what has been evoked in me.
Oh yeah, no, I evoke. Yeah, it allows to be evoked.
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't think it has much social interest in social.
I'm not talking about the film. I'm talking about what is evoked by me by the film. Not necessarily that the filmmakers even were thinking about that or even wanting to make a statement of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at it. Really, when I look at this, okay, they're saying it's a bunch of misfits in Slab City. Obviously, as you say, same thing you say. There's a lot of mental illness. There's addiction. You could really see that there's not much that it's rootedness. Yet at the same time, it's like all these people have come from other places and have left these other places because it wasn't working for them.
Right.
And went to this place because there's something about this place that had more to offer than wherever they were.
Yeah, I agree. But it may be because no one gives a shit about the place, that it gives them some freedom of that their particular psyches are so displaced, say like in urban San Francisco, that they need a place that's open and neglected in order not to have, in a way, inappropriate expectations or demands that they can't possibly meet.
And maybe that's good. Within what it's serving a purpose for them, I mean, I think about, I don't know, I just think about, the other day, I was in a coffee shop in San Anselmo, and there was, I don't even know what it's just this man just started to go next to the garbage can and just started yelling at something. And everybody just kind of just stared, because this is like, I've lived in San Anselmo for 10 years, 11 years, but this is the first time it's ever happened. I've seen it in public. In San Francisco, I see it more often. But it's a behavior that's not, it's out of place in San Anselmo. Yet, if this was happening in San Francisco, it would cause even much less of a wave because it's more normal. So I'm kind of thinking about if some of these misfits in the film,
Sure.
if they were in San Francisco or in San Anselmo, and they were to exhibit the same behavior here, what do you think would be?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know, maybe
the cops would pull them off, or they would be in some institution or something. They are. Yeah. It's not like that population is not here.
Yeah.
And we both have worked with these communities in urban settings, so. Yeah, I think the film had a kind of lovely balance of the tragic, but without the downbeat, as inflected. I think emotionally, credibly, hopefully. It didn't seem like there's a movie, Life is Beautiful, an Italian film. Did you ever see that?
I don't think so.
About the I think he was a baker or something who was in the concentration camp, or in a prisoner of war camp in concentration camp in Italy. Hated the film. Hated the film. It took this awful nightmare, evil situation, and layered on this phony jolliness. Awful. Anyway, it's distinct from that.
Okay.
I'm going to make a compendium on one of the movie talks. We're going to talk about all the films I hate and loathe. There's a handful, but maybe like a series of them. But this film seemed like that it wasn't layered on.
there's a lightness to this film somehow, even though they're talking about a lot of despairing.
Yeah, and it does, and it feels like a that if you catch the light in a certain angle, you see this film.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually there. It's not the whole spectrum of light, but it's genuinely there if you look through a certain lens. So it didn't feel layered on or unearned. Yeah.
No, it's for me. It's like when I think about the family, yeah, and how they went through all these different permutations, and we see them more now rather than before. But we were told of what happened before, yeah.
Yeah.
There. For me, there was hope that was being shown. There was a desire for betterment.
Yeah.
You know, there is a maturation. There's the you know, when they were talking about it's dirty, yeah. The house was dirty, and then the child services, protective services came in, and she just said, like, just so honestly, but something like, I grew up in a dirty house, so that was like kind of.
Yeah, I was just learning.
Yeah, so there was this brazen honesty that yeah, it's just, yeah, that's how it is, and then, you know, and I don't know, it was just very touching for me, like, you know, there were snippets of it, of like when her husband, when he got drunk, you know, with, I don't know, the other man, and he's going, you will never experience some of the things I experienced in prison. There was just this, you know, it was brief in comparison to the length of the film, but it was just poignant of like, yeah, there are certain things, you know, that that was the albatross, yeah.
What do you mean?
You know, like in the, what is that book, Moby Dick, when the man would say, when, you know, when you start to wear the albatross around your neck and it drags you down.
No, that was the Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Yes, the ancient. Sorry, right? Okay, and
Yeah.
and so there were these pieces within people's lives that were presented. That I know, it's just like different pieces, you know, instead of just seeing it as, I know that the filmer kept pointing it toward, there was a lot of showing of the wreckage, you know, of the junk, of the dead fish. But somehow with these different people's lives, snippets of people's lives, like for me that stood out more rather than just the junk. You know, and because even though it was tragic, a lot of the different things that's happening to people, tragedy doesn't mean it's junk. And so that was kind of, I don't know, there was just something in me that's like, wow, some people really have it hard.
Yeah.
And how do people rise?
Yeah. I don't think the film actually presented any junk per se. In other words, it presented wreckage, but I don't think it looked at it as junk as in unredeemable cast off.
Okay.
I think it looked at it as artifacts that will be recycled through creativity and hope into something new, rather than stuff that's either people or literal materials that's irredeemably useless. You know, I mean, it showed a lot of, like, the dead fish. There was nothing really that was decayed all the way. That actually, you know, there was animals that were just desiccated, dead and desiccated, that
or bones, yeah.
Or bones, right? Or that presumably would never, or would take. The felt sense was like they would just be there forever. And so the redemptive force is not one of like nature. I mean, the whole area is created by a man-made disaster, but that the redemptive force is dreaming. You know, and that the boys, CJ's dream, he was, like he said towards the end, he said, what I dream, something like what I dreamed, I'm putting in the work and making it real. And it seemed like he would. Right? So it seemed like that was its take on, that was one of the ways in which it expressed the hopefulness that people were making, like the boat, or the boat the boy was playing on.
Yeah, I thought that was
cool. What was that? Like someone had taken this wrecked boat and made this dreamscape out of the land. Yeah.
Well, but that was kind of part of, for me, of like, wow, all the possibilities that you can do, because you can really think out of the box, because you have also the space, and you can create, and you can actually, I mean, when you think of like, different works of art that take a lot of different pieces, remnants of different things, put it together.
Yeah.
And so there's that one aspect of that there, that can be also a possibility, but then there's the other. You take all the same components, but it becomes, like this thing was just coming to me, because I do know, like, in the desert, people like to collect things. Some people like to collect things, and then you just throw them away. Yeah, you just throw them out in the desert.
Okay.
This is like, I've seen it growing up there. And then there's the other aspect, if you have also a group of people that living in this particular, certain communities where there might be hoarding. And so you put these two together, where in the desert you have this endless space. So it had kind of all the different aspects to it,
Yeah, well, you get this endless space for dreaming and creativity. You also get this endless space for pathology.
Exactly, and that was kind of what was together, kept coming in, and you go, well, what is the interface?
So that was kind of the dialectic of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then which spin do you take? You put on it personally.
Yeah.
Collectively.
And as observer of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like. It was just fascinating to kind of like, have all that happening within myself.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, okay, and so it challenged my own sense of organization for that moment, for those different snippets, if I really surrender into just it. Because there were all these different facets. Okay, I could look at it like, wow, there's a possibility of expansive desert with creativity that's of material. There's all this artistic material for creativity in the desert, i.e. A couch with a lot of springs showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But then you have also, then you can just see, there's just all these collections of this, because there's really no money to buy the latest thing from.
Right.
Yeah. And but then it also becomes a mirror of the wasting away of certain possibilities internally, and not looking and nurturing after those places. So all this were like happening simultaneously, and to hold it together without dismissing this and saying it's just this or that. So I kind of just suspend my own level of comfort for harmony and beauty and all that. To be able to kind of just go, oh wow, all of it is there.
And again, the film definitely took its own perspective on that, but it didn't disallow your ability to imagine what's not in the center of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Like the guy who's somehow got his arm broken outside the bar. Like he probably is not the most creative force in the desert there.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the three characters the film the family and the two characters that he focused on. So it both had a constrained focus, and it didn't deny, it just made a choice about where it was going to focus its attention.
I suppose it had to, otherwise how could it be just be like this whole this disparate parts?
Well, but it could have made a choice that didn't allow you to see anything else.
Yeah.
And have soaring violin music and.
Which you wouldn't have felt. No, it's true. It tried to kind of give a little bit of flavor of the community now.
Yeah, it gave the flavor, and then I think it was modeling what it was talking about as hopeful, which is where you choose, what you hope for defines how you cull through the wreckage and make something creative. Right? That there's a powerful choice to be made, no matter what the scenery is, no matter what the human scenery is. That the filmmaker was making their choice to present through a certain aesthetic the feeling tone of that hopeful choice, but it didn't disallow that there were other choices that other people in that film presumably did make. It's just the film was choosing a certain lens, believing that has a sculpting force.
I agree with you, because there was definitely a thread.
Yeah.
That was running through the film. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now in movie talk, we rate with our thumbs.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. So, and we give it. There's a double entendre. So, it's erectness of thumbs that determines.
The erectness of thumbs.
Erectness, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm gonna give it 1.5 erect thumbs. One fully erect and one semi-flaccid thumb.
Okay, I'm gonna go one fully erect.
Yeah.
And one that's if it wasn't a clock, it would be a 25. So it'd be 125.
But is it a flaccid thumb moving towards erectness or moving towards greater flaccidity?
No, going towards more erect.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you again for visiting another episode of Movie Talk.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.